Hey, what's going on? It's the Mex Canadian, and today I figured what better way to officially start this channel with ranking how I believe every team did in the 2022-2023 season. As you guys all know, the NHL season just ended. The Stanley Cup has been awarded, and like I said, I figured what better than to go through every team and rank who I believe did the best. And this is purely, well, I can't say purely. This is going to be based off of basic statistics like wins, losses, stuff like that, but also kind of personal, not preference, but how I seen everybody go. Because in the end, numbers say a lot, but there are oftentimes with some teams that it can be subjective whether, their scene been doing good or bad. Like rebuilding teams, they can be perceived as doing really good because they're in a rebuild, maybe overachieving or underachieving. And teams who are, middle of the pack to really good could be seen as underachieving because the bar is set so high for them. So I figured I'll put my 2 cents in like everybody else has. So we are going to start off, obviously, as you can see, everything is in alphabetical order. So we're going to start off with the Anaheim Ducks. Yeah, there's not much to say. They had a horrible season. Now, I know a lot of people didn't think Anaheim was going to be good. Nobody thought Anaheim was going to make the playoffs or anything. But I don't think anybody expected them to be this bad. With Zegras and McTavish on that forward line, and Gibson, you cannot put almost any of this season on Gibson. He played almost elite level, and if they had a better blue line, just a slightly better blue line, realistically, I believe Anaheim would not have finished dead last in the league. And speaking of dead last in the league, we have Arizona. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff going on with Arizona right now. You've got, if they're even going to be a team anymore, or if they're going to relocate. I know there's talks of them relocating to Salt Lake. Houston's a big contender. No, they are not going to move to Quebec. Stop asking. But realistically, if you look at Anaheim, if you look at Arizona's season, they kind of overachieved. I'm going to put them as a D because for a team as low as they are, they had some really high spots. They had some really, especially playing in Mullet Arena, like they had some pretty high spots. And in my opinion, they definitely overachieved for a team that has achieved literally nothing since becoming an NHL team. So next, this is obvious. Boston S tier. They finished the season with the best record in NHL history. Ullmark is pretty much guaranteed to win the Vezina. Pastrnak broke out and became the superstar that we all knew he could be. And then, Bergeron, Marchand, all of them, they played incredible. The only thing the only blemish on this incredible run that Boston had was being eliminated in the first round after being up 3-1 against the literal lowest rated seed in the entire playoffs, Florida, which we'll get to soon, obviously. But Boston had they were the quintessential, like the perfect playoff team. You had grit, especially with adding Bertuzzi. You had grit on that team. You had skill with Pastrnak, Marchand. They were one Brad Marchand breakaway away from winning the entire fucking series. And Boston just ate it. And it sucks because that is what they're going to be remembered for this season. Not in, primarily at least. And they're not going to be fully remembered for having the best season in NHL history. Just that they blew a 3-1 lead to the lowest rated 8th seed in the entire NHL playoffs this year. Next, we have Buffalo. Buffalo is an interesting one. They started off the season really slow. Like, they were in the middle of the pack there with Ottawa and Detroit for a while in the division. And for a little while, it looked like it was going to be a repeat of last season. Where the top 3 teams in the division just completely blow every team behind them out of the water. But I think I'm going to have to give them a solid... I'm going to give them an A, maybe a B. It's debatable. I'm going to give Buffalo an A because towards the latter half of the season, they got really red hot and started playing like Tage Thompson was playing incredible the entire season. Cannot remember any of the other star players' names because I don't really care about Buffalo too much. But no, Buffalo has potential. I think Buffalo is going to be a team that is competing for, if not a shoo-in for the playoffs next season. And they kind of have to be. They're going on 12 years out of the playoffs now. The current longest playoff-less streak in the NHL history. So they definitely have to at least, like, they almost made it. They are this close, and with the East getting ready to flip, it looks like, I think that they will likely end up making the playoffs in this upcoming season. Calgary, I'm going to give them a B. Calgary is another one of those teams that I don't really follow too much. I just follow them a little bit, a little bit more than most people who aren't fans would, I guess. But Calgary had a really good season. Like, realistically, they could have made the playoffs, and they had numerous times and chances to make the playoffs, but they just couldn't do it. They could have knocked Winnipeg out several times going towards the end of the season, and they just couldn't do it. It was almost like they gave up. The first 3 quarters of the season, they played a really good hockey, and they were in, playoff contention and stuff like that constantly. But, as they got to the end of the season, like I said, it kind of felt like they almost gave up. Obviously, I'm sure Daryl Sutter didn't have any, didn't help. So this next season is going to be interesting. I think that Calgary is planning on making the playoffs next season, because I don't see that the whole Western Conference being the same exact way as it was. Vegas is likely going to be the same way that they were this year. Colorado seems to be not fading, because you've still got at least 2 of the greatest players in the NHL active right now, at least. Obviously, Landeskog's out, but Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar, 2 of the best players in the league and probably the world. So with that, you can't really go too wrong. But we'll get to them later. Next, we've got Carolina. And Carolina, I'm going to give them an A. They were the second best team in the entire league this year, but they had a lot of scoring problems, which is wild to say for the second best team in the entire league. But their games didn't come from goals. I don't think, very few Carolina games were won by 3 or more goals. I'm pretty sure. I don't have the exact stats because I'm not going to look at their entire fucking season, but Carolina plays a very defensive game. That's obvious. And Anderson and Ranta are 2 really solid 1A, 1B goalies. So I think the future for Carolina is bright. Now, their biggest problem is not making the playoffs. They are likely going to continue making the playoffs for 2 or 3 more years down the road. Their problem is being able to play consistent playoff hockey. Now, they bodied the Islanders. That was kind of obvious. And then they went into the second round, bodied New Jersey. And then they just stopped. They just seemed like they gave up against Florida. And, not to take anything away from Florida, we'll get to them in a bit. They played incredible. They were the better team for that entire series. But Carolina just gave up, it looked like. It didn't look like they were trying to win. So that's something Carolina's going to have to work on if they ever want to make it to another Stanley Cup final. I think they're 0-12 in Stanley Cup Conference Finals appearances right now. They haven't won a single conference final since they last won the Cup. Next, we've got Chicago, definite F tier. And it was by design, realistically. Now, obviously, I'm not rating this based off of everything that they had, with the sexual assault allegations and cover-up and stuff like that. We'll get into that in probably a different video where I talk about the draft. This was all by design. In the offseason, they traded away DeBrincat, Kubalik. They were trading people left and right at the deadline. They were tanking. As much as Bettman wants to say teams don't tank, this team was full on tanking. Straight up whole ass tanking. And it's incredible to see, because it's just a spit in Gary Bettman's face. And it's kind of funny. I don't think Bettman is this evil overlord of the NHL who just wants to make money and nothing else. I do think he genuinely cares for the sport. it's just kind of fun. It's just the decisions he makes for the NHL to make money, like the mobile app, billboard and stuff like that. He does kind of seem like he just kind of ignores everybody else except for like his yes men, which it's neither here nor there at this point. No one's gonna get nothing. Bettman's gonna keep doing what he's gonna do, and we can't do anything about it. So, but yeah, Chicago definitely tanked. Like I said, it was kind of funny watching an original 6 team spit in Bettman's face essentially and blatantly tank. And they got the first overall pick for it, which, like I said, we will get into in a different video. But next we've got Colorado, and it's hard to say, but I'm going to give Colorado a B. Yeah, it's a bit... It's weird. Last year's Stanley Cup champions, and it wasn't even close. Like, last year's Stanley Cup, Colorado only lost 4 times. Like, they went into the first round and swept Nashville, and then they went into the second round, and St. Louis beat them twice, and then Colorado bodied them. Then they went into the conference finals against Edmonton, swept Edmonton, and then only lost twice to 2-time Stanley Cup defending champions, Tampa Bay. So, you know, it's weird when we talk about this, and Colorado only being a B this season. Obviously, they had injuries. You know, Landeskog being out for the season didn't help them at all. And they started off really slow. Like, there was a period for the first quarter, maybe half of the season, where it looked like Colorado might have to contend for a playoff spot. Like, they might come down to the wire. But then, you know, they got hot at the right time, and they ended up winning the division, beating out Dallas and Minnesota. And then they went in and lost to Seattle in the first round. 7 games, mind you, and that Seattle team is pretty solid. We'll get to them too, but it's hard to give them anything but a B with the way their season shaked out, and it doesn't look like things are going to get much better for them next season, with Landeskog likely out for the rest of next season, for all of next season too, and so they're going to have to make some moves to fill that gap bit. They're definitely a lot more top heavy in talent than they are than they are in depth now, as they were when they won the Cup last year. So it's going to be interesting to see where Colorado goes from here. Next, Columbus. Definite F tier. This was not how Columbus wanted this season to go, obviously. They added Johnny Gaudreau, and they had a solid lineup, and then, bam, injuries happen. And they were basically icing a team of AI-generated players from NHL 23 GM mode. You know, where they, like, add a bunch of... where they use, like, players' names and shit like that are like current players' names and make completely random new characters and shit like players and whatnot. Yeah, that's pretty much what they were playing with. It was the definition of a video game custom team. Like, it didn't go well for them. Next year, they're adding some pieces for next year, but it doesn't look like it's... You know, they added Provorov and whatnot. So it'll be interesting, but it looks like they're set on being mediocre next year, which, fair enough. Their expectations shouldn't be incredibly high the way they dropped off this season, but they shouldn't be bottom 3 of the league. You know, they shouldn't be draft lottery top 3, you know, guaranteed, essentially. Next, we've got Dallas. The Dallas I'm also going to give a B. They were kind of up and down all season. They were top of their division for pretty much the entire season. They competed there with Minnesota quite often too, until Colorado got hot, and then obviously Colorado won. But it came down to the wire between those 3 teams for being the top of the division. But Dallas played solid. Jason Robertson broke out as a superstar, and Ottinger is going to be a very good elite level goaltender once he matures. And they made it to the conference finals. Like, they went to the conference finals in the West, where they took Vegas to, what was it, 5 games? 6 games. But I cannot give Dallas anything more than a B, because Jamie Benn is still their captain. And I don't like Jamie Benn, as I don't think most people do. But it's whatever, decisions and whatnot. But you can't argue that Jamie Benn being suspended for the 2 games that Dallas won against Vegas didn't have anything to do with it. So I have hopes for Dallas. I think I think I will see in my lifetime. I will see Dallas win another Stanley Cup. At least I hope, because I'm still rather young, and it would be a shame to see my third favorite team not win a cup. But my top two teams I have yet to see win a cup either, which brings me to my favorite team, the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings are an interesting case, I tell you. Obviously, I watch the Detroit Red Wings more than any other team because they are my team, and I'm going to give them a C. They started off the year really hot, whether that was due to ease of schedule or just because, they added all these pieces in the offseason and, it just clicked really quickly. And then, once we hit December, things kind of fell quite hard. And then after December, after the New Year's Eve break and whatnot, the Red Wings really picked it up, went on a 6-game win streak. And then they were just kind of up and down for most of the middle of the season. And then the end of the season, after the trade deadline, where Yzerman traded Bertuzzi, Hronek, Sundqvist, it fell off quite a bit, which everyone expected it to. When you trade pieces like Bertuzzi and Hronek, you don't just fill those places in. Like, Hronek was the Detroit Red Wings' second pairing right-handed D-man. He was playing really good. He had really good offensive numbers. Bertuzzi, he was hurt and only played like 6 games. I think it was either 6 or 13. I can't remember the exact numbers. Somewhere between there in total for the Red Wings this season, because he injured his hand, came back, then injured his other hand. It was really unfortunate. But, trading Sundqvist was neither here nor there. Sundqvist was just going to be a 3-4 line guy for his entire tenure with the Red Wings, regardless. But, there was definite improvement from the Red Wings from the last 2 seasons. Obviously, anything's an improvement from the 2019 season. But, 2021, 2022, those seasons were meh. And I know the overall numbers don't look like the Red Wings improved at all, but they definitely improved. Larkin has started to emerge as a consistent 30-goal scorer, point-per-game guy. Raymond and Seider had their sophomore slumps, but they are still really incredible talent. The Seider-Wallman pairing broke out to be one of the top 5 pairings in the league. So things are meshing. They re-signed Wallman. They re-signed Mata. Mata has turned out to become an incredible signing, an incredible veteran signing along with Perron. Kopp had a bit of a down year, but towards the end of the year, he really showed people what he could really do, I think. And Detroit's got plenty of prospects in the pipeline. You got Evanson, who's likely going to come up. Casper is really going to make a push for the main roster. Same with Mazur, he's going to make a push for the main roster. Then you've still got Wallander, McIsaac, Johansson, Lombardi, and whoever we draft this season. This is a great deep draft, and Detroit could pick up some really big pieces, like scoring. Detroit's biggest problem is scoring. They cannot rely on Larkin and Raymond to score they can't rely on Larkin to score most of the goals, and they have plenty of 25 goal scorers in Kubalik, Perron, and then, plenty of depth pieces like Fabry when he's healthy. Rasmussen's good for 15 goals, stuff like that. So, word is Yzerman's going to get pretty aggressive in the offseason, and I'm excited to see what he does in the draft, because I trust the Yzer plan completely. Next, we have the Edmonton Oilers. It's hard to place the Oilers. Honestly, it is. Because I'm going to give them a B, because they struggled at the beginning of the season. They weren't even in a playoff spot at the beginning of the season. Then, we got deeper into the season. McDavid started to become godlike, hit 30 goals before December, when we hit December, something like that. And he scored 66 goals this season. He's playing like the Connor McDavid we all know he is. But the problem is that couldn't carry them for pretty much the first half of the season. Now, obviously, they made a push and they challenged for the top of the division against Vegas. They were challenging for top three in the for top of the division. Yeah, because that was, what was that? Vegas, Edmonton, and I want to say at the time they were challenging, that would have been LA. So, Edmonton, they just need to add more depth. You can't rely on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to carry you through the playoffs. You can't. They can carry you through the regular season all live long fucking day because who's going to stop them? But you can't rely on them to carry you through the playoffs. You can't, because you shut them down, you shut the team down. And Skinner looks like he's going to be a really good goaltender. So, there's still some work for Edmonton to do. Next, we have Florida. This is probably going to be the most complicated one in this entire ranking, because Florida was not very good for the entire season. They almost didn't make the playoffs. They only made the playoffs because of specific circumstances, which we'll get to when we get to a certain team. But I'm going to give Florida a C. Florida was not good, like I said. They just barely made the playoffs. And they were the lowest ranked team in the entire playoffs. Now, should they get a higher score because of the playoff run? Quite possibly. But based off of the entire regular season, because I do think it's important to see how a team performs in the postseason, because playoff hockey and regular season hockey are two completely different animals. But for the regular season, you've got more of a sample size, as opposed to the playoffs where you've got 16 games minimum. So they played phenomenal in the playoffs, mind you, up until the finals, where they ended up losing to Vegas 4-1, and it wasn't even fucking close. But the Bobrovsky contract didn't age very well until the playoffs. Bobrovsky was replaced pretty much by Lyon for most of the regular season, until Bobrovsky became Vezina winning Bobrovsky again in the playoffs. But they were struggling, so I got to give them a C just based off of the regular season. If it wasn't for their postseason, I probably would have given them a D, because for the former president's winning trophy team, they definitely underperformed. Incredibly underperformed. But Tkachuk is looking to be a really good leader, and they've got a lot of good pieces on that team, so I expect that to go up higher. Next, we've got LA. LA is going to get a B. Really solid team. LA just needs a few more pieces, and I think that they'll be a strong team again. LA's been quietly good for the last few years. The whole thing with John Quick, that is still a debatable reasoning for anything, but it's neither here nor there. Pieces get moved all the time. The way they handled it was not very good, obviously, but in the end, LA gets a B because they are still a solid top three team, top three division team. They finished third in their division, so can't really argue with that. Next, we got Minnesota. I'm giving Minnesota an A. They were a really good team for the regular season, and they dropped the ball. Actually, you know what? They're going down to B. I feel like I have too many teams in B, but that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess. But Minnesota was really good for the offseason. They were challenging in first place in their division for a while, and they were in the mix all the way up until the end with Colorado and Dallas for that first spot, and then they got bodied by Dallas in the first round. Minnesota's biggest problem is their blue line. Or maybe it's not their blue line. I think it's just an overall problem of they play too defensively almost. Like, they play a suffocating defense, which is a good strategy. If you defend the other team completely, they can't score. They can't score, and you can. Kaprizov showed up to be a star, but they need a few more offensive pieces and better goaltending. Marc-Andre Fleury is not going to be your starter next year, I don't think. So they've still got work to do, but I do still think that Minnesota will end up being in the playoffs again next year. Montreal. Montreal's going to go with Arizona. I think they overperformed. I think they performed better than what most people expected of them this year. Obviously, with not having Price or Weber, both seeming to have career-ending injuries, it hurt them. But they're still a rebuilding team. They have got the pieces, in Suzuki, Slafkovsky, Caulfield. You've got all these really solid pieces. You just need to keep building on it. And I think Montreal in the next 2 or 3 years will be a competing team. Next, we have Nashville. I'm going to give them a C. They definitely underperformed from what last year was and previous years. They missed the playoffs, but they still finished with a positive record, which is good. But, and Soros is an elite level goaltender. So you've got these pieces. You just got to make them mesh. And, Barry Trotz coming in and basically saying we're not going to go out and find 3-4 line guys. We are going to try and make stars. Nashville's got a good future. New Jersey, I'm giving an S. 100% I'm giving New Jersey an S. This team overperformed to the fullest. No, nothing else really to say. They overperformed. Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes, they are going to turn out to be elite level talent. One of them already is. I can't remember which one. But yes, they are going to be. This team is going to be good for a while to come. They still have like $30 million cap space. Like they still have more cap. They're still one of the top teams in cap space going into next season, so they could still add to this. Schmid coming out in the playoffs like he did, looking like he's going to be a great, solid goaltender for them in the future, and the future's bright for New Jersey, and they are going to be a very fun team to watch for the next however long. The Islanders, I'm giving them a C2. They were middle of the pack for most of the season, actually the entire season. They were below the playoff line for a while when Florida and Washington were competing for that wild card spot, but then then Washington fell out. New York took that spot, and then it was Florida and Pittsburgh that were fighting for that spot. So they added Bo Horvat. They have Barzal still. They've still got one of the best goaltenders in the league in Sorokin. So the pieces are there as well. They just need to make it work better. From what I've seen, what they need to do more of is better defense, add 1 or 2 more depth defense pieces, and some more solid goal scoring. Bo Horvat's not going to have another year like he did last year. It's just not going to happen. Barzal, you can always trust to be a 30-plus goal scorer. Horvat probably will likely still be another 30 goal scorer. But to put up those numbers again, you just can't expect it from him. So, yep, Islanders are at a C. Next New York team, the Rangers. We're going to give them a B. They dropped the ball in the postseason, and they couldn't get past that third spot in the regular season. Now, placing third in the regular season in your division isn't bad, but when you just can't break past that barrier between to get past New Jersey or Carolina, it can say something about you. New York had a really rough start at the beginning of the season, but then as things picked up, obviously with a team that has Panarin, Fox, and whatnot on there, it's going to be a good team regardless. But then they couldn't get out of that third place spot, and then when they got to the postseason, they just hit a brick wall called New Jersey, and New Jersey was just skating circles around them, and their big guys didn't show up. Panarin didn't have a single point. Lafreniere didn't have a point. Actually, I think Lafreniere did have at least 1 point, but their big guys didn't show up to play. So, like Panarin's, Banajat, they didn't show up to play, and it cost them the playoffs. They got bodied by New Jersey, and it wasn't even close. So, next year it will probably be different. I doubt they're going to keep Tarasenko and Kane, obviously. But next year, I think they're going to learn from their mistakes and hopefully do better for their sake. I don't care one way or another, but for their sake, I hope they do, because they're in probably the worst town to have a shit hockey team. One of the worst towns to have a shit hockey team in. So, next you've got Ottawa. Ottawa's also going to go in C tier. Obviously, they shot themselves in the foot at the beginning of the season with their GM saying that the rebuild's over, and then they whiffed on making the playoffs. Like, it wasn't even close. They got eliminated the same day Detroit did, which, to be fair, both of them last year were eliminated from the playoffs when these 5 teams were. Like, so for both of them to not be eliminated until there were like 7 games left in the entire season, it says there's improvement. There's a lot of improvement. Ottawa is in a bit of a predicament, though. They could lose to DeBrincat, which is neither here nor there. I don't think DeBrincat really meshed well with the Ottawa team, because Ottawa plays a very physical game. DeBrincat is not a physical player, or at least he can't be a physical player, being fucking 5'9" or whatever he is. But he only scored 27 goals as opposed to the 40 goals he scored with Chicago. And I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, but he had Kane to pass it to him." Maybe that's true, but if your floor without having an elite playmaker pass you the puck to get 40 goals is 27 goals, if 27 goals is your floor, it's not hard-pressed to think you can score 35 goals. So, it's just one of those things where perspective, I guess. So, Ottawa's going to have to go out and probably find some more scoring depth to fill that hole, or maybe draft another, air quotes, elite. I don't want to say elite, because the only elite level talents that are likely going to come out of this draft is Bedard and Michkov. So, but they need to find another 30-goal scorer. That's what I'm saying. And they will likely find one within this draft. So, it'll be interesting for Ottawa as well. Philadelphia, I'm going to give them a D. They were really good for points when Tortorella was named their coach. Philadelphia overperformed a lot. They went on a win streak there for a while and were, pushing teams out of the way in the Eastern Conference. So, obviously, at the end, they dropped off massively, and that's to be expected. They're going into an official rebuild, which means do some of their players stay? Like, there's been a lot of rumors around Carter Hart. Does he want to stay through a rebuild when he's in the prime of his career? It's one thing for a young 23, 24-year-old goaltender to want to stay through a rebuild, because rebuilds, if done right, can be done as soon as 4 or 5 years down the road. But they could be done 3 or 4 years down the road, for Christ's sake. But with Philly, I don't see that happening. So does Hart want to stay through that rebuild until he's like 30? So it'd really be up to him at this point, I guess. But yeah, Philadelphia definitely overperformed at points this season, so they get a D. Pittsburgh, wow, I can't give them anything but a D. That was not good. I am rating them below Detroit and Ottawa, even though they finished above both of them in the standings, and while they were competing for a spot in the playoffs. But Pittsburgh, man, wow, what a fall from grace they had. They were never a top 3 team in the division. They were never going to. They've got they had, I think, the oldest team in the league whose average age was in the 30s or very late 20s at the very least. So they kind of did it to themselves, and I don't see it getting better next season. They're probably still going to shoot for the playoffs, because when you've got a team that has Crosby, Malkin, and Letang on it, it's easy to bet on them for them making the playoffs. But boy, did they drop the ball. They lost to Detroit 2 out of the 3 times they played this year, and candid fashion. The first time was when they blew a 4-0 lead and lost in overtime. That was Jake Wellman's gritty. Then I believe they won the second meeting, and then they lost a second meeting against Detroit 7-5 or something like that, and then they beat Detroit in the third meeting later in the season after Detroit was trading in their free fall. But all they had to do was defeat Chicago and Columbus to make the playoffs and beat out Florida. And what do? They got fucking bodied by Columbus and Chicago. And that's why I'm giving them a D. They were not good for the last half of the season. Straight up. They weren't really that good for most of the season, honestly. They were very streaky. They would go and win 5 games in a row, then they'd lose 5, 6 in a row, then go back and win 6 or 7, lose 4 more in a row, and they were very up and down. So that's why I'm giving them a D. Plus, they blew it at the end of the season. San Jose, F. Hard to give them anything but an F. You can make an argument for D, but San Jose did not have a good season at all. And, I mean, they were a bottom 5 team. They're drafting 4th. So that really says everything. Yes, Carlson had the first 100-point season by a defenseman in I can't even remember how long. But that couldn't help get them anywhere. And San Jose is going to be bad for at least another 2 or 3 years. But I don't follow San Jose, so that's really all I've got. Seattle, A. There was a point where Seattle was first in their division. There was. And now, while, yes, they made the playoffs as the first wild card spot, they dropped a bit. Last year, they were a bottom 5 team. I think they were actually bottom 3. So, what a fucking leap. Now, Seattle still has a little bit to go. They're a very well-rounded team, as we saw. Seattle just comes at you in waves. They basically got a team of second-liners. And when you have a team of second-liners, you get incredible depth. They only had one person on their team score over 30 goals this year. So, take that into consideration. But also, they just have this culture, I guess, where it's just go at them as hard as you can, as best as you can, and just keep rolling those 4 lines. And, Grubauer played great. I'm pretty sure it was Grubauer that was their goalie. I can't remember. No, Grubauer was Colorado's. Was it Gorgiev? I think it was Gorgiev. I can't remember their goalie's name because I don't care about Seattle that much. But, yes, Seattle, and they knocked out Colorado in the first round of the postseason. Then they went on and took Dallas to a Game 7 as well. So, yeah, the hopes are high for Seattle next season. If Shane Wright and Matty Beniers break out as they were expected to and scouted to, then this team could be really poised for a deep playoff run in the next year or two. And I'll make another video about, past draft picks and whatnot and how I think they're going to fare in the NHL and stuff like that and whatnot. I'll figure that out. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about St. Louis. They get a C. St. Louis underperformed a lot this season. They made the playoffs last year, made it to the second round, were one of 2 teams to hand Colorado 2 losses, or any loss for that matter. And now they are in the draft lottery. It was a fall from grace. But they did it themselves as well. When they decided to move all the guys they did, it was kind of easy to see in hindsight, You moved Perron, you moved Tarasenko at the trade deadline. You've got, Yzerman swindled fucking St. Louis for a lot. He got Sundqvist and Wallman for a trade involving Nick Leddy, and they got Husso. They let Husso walk. They let Husso walk, they let Perron walk. That team basically gave away their Stanley Cup winning team. So, I mean, I'm not going to complain that the Red Wings are going to, benefit from them. Tampa Bay, I'm going to give Tampa Bay a B. They fell a decent amount. Now, did they fall from grace? Not really, but they definitely were not the same. Tampa Bay is getting to be an older team, and you can tell, Stamkos isn't playing like Stamkos, and sorry if you hear those fucking sirens, but Stamkos isn't playing like Stamkos, or at least he wasn't. And yeah, towards the end of the year, there was talk. They were not going to come anywhere close to competing with Toronto and Boston. And then they committed the cardinal sin of letting Toronto get out of the first round. So, and I say that as Toronto being my second favorite team. Yes, I'm putting that out there as a Detroit fan that Toronto is my second favorite team, but it's true. Toronto is my second favorite team, and they are the ones who let Toronto out of the first round. So, take that away, you will. Toronto, they had an incredible regular season. I forgot the word for a second there. They had a great regular season. They finished, I think, third or fourth. They finished top 5 in the entire league, and it was kind of not close. Like, obviously Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares, your big four, showed up through the regular season and then didn't show up at all in the second round. Which is typical Matthews fashion. He can't show up. Matthews has not proven that he can show up during the big games. He plays incredible during the regular season, but during the postseason, he becomes a ghost. And that's because the postseason is based off of physicality and grit as opposed to just pure skill. So, and Toronto's always done that. They've always gone with skill over grit. The grittiest player they have is Michael Bunting, and Michael Bunting's he's just an ass. So, he's, Brad Marchand from Wish.com. Next we have Vancouver. D. I don't follow Vancouver very often, but from what I've seen, they are still the same Vancouver. Doomed for mediocrity. Obviously, how they handled the Bruce Boudreau situation, not good. But not even including that, they just were the same Vancouver. They got hot at times, but they, during the end of the season, once, I can't even remember dude's name, once Tocchet took over, he seemed to get the team going, but we'll see if that works out next season. But as of right now, they're doomed for mediocrity, and they're over the last I checked, the buyout of Oliver Ekman-Larsson may have put them under the salary cap. I haven't looked into that, but last I checked, they were over the salary cap for next season. So it's going to be interesting. Likely more buyouts to come from them. Vegas, S tier. There was a point in the season where Vegas didn't look very good. They looked like, at best, a wild card spot. But then they got their shit together and won the Stanley Cup. Pretty handedly, too. They just kind of cruised through the entire Western Conference. They bodied Winnipeg 4-1. Then they went in, beat up Edmonton 4-2. Then they went in, beat up Dallas 4-2. So, and then they went in and bodied Florida 4-1. It was incredible because Vegas, I think it was the Wing Wheeled podcast that said it, but Vegas is the best team that nobody is considering. And it's wild because they were the best team in the Western Conference. So the fact they didn't get any consideration to even make it very far in the playoffs, let alone win the cup, is incredible. I think a lot of that has to do with how good Boston did. So it kind of overshadowed Vegas. But at the same time, Vegas winning the Western Conference still only put them 4th or 5th in the league. So that might have had something to do with it too. Next, we've got Washington. Washington's going down here with Pittsburgh. They were doing pretty good for the beginning of the season, but it really showed. Like, everybody kind of figured that without Ovechkin, Washington wasn't going to be able to do much. But when Washington lost Ovechkin because he went back to Russia because I believe his dad passed away, for that, like, 2-week span that Ovechkin was out, that's what cost Washington everything. And Washington just fell hard. They finished way below the playoff line. I mean, they finished below the Red Wings in Ottawa, I'm pretty sure. So, I think they even finished below St. Louis, maybe. I can't remember. But, yeah, it's clear that Washington isn't going to be a competing team for very long. Or ever again. Who knows? And last but not least, Winnipeg. They're getting a D. This one is kind of difficult, but not really. At the beginning of the season, it looked like Winnipeg, if anyone was going to choose from the Western Conference what team could win the Stanley Cup from the Western Conference, everybody would have told you Winnipeg will, because they started off incredible. Like, Winnipeg was really freaking good, but then it fell apart. Like, and it didn't just fall apart, it, like, crumbled and then disintegrated. Like, it was so bad. And now a lot of things have come out, obviously the locker room situation seems to be pretty toxic. A lot of that seems to be going on Blake Wheeler. I guess from what I've heard or read, at least, I don't have any insiders because, of course, I don't. But from what I've read, Blake Wheeler isn't a very good captain. Like, he's not a very good person to hang out around. So you've got a lot of their top guys that are wanting to leave. Hellebuck wants to leave. Kyle Connor wants to leave. Shifley wants to leave. You've got all of your top-end talent wanting to leave. And, I'm sure managing doesn't help. I'm sure coaching doesn't help. So it's a pretty bad situation in Winnipeg, and I don't see them making the playoffs next season. So, yeah. Anyways, that's going to be it, obviously, to recap. We've got in the S tier, Boston, New Jersey, Vegas. A tier, Buffalo, Carolina, Seattle, Toronto. B tier, Calgary, Colorado, Dallas, Edmonton, LA, Minnesota, fucking New York, Tampa. C tier, Detroit, Florida, Nashville, the Islanders, Ottawa, and St. Louis. D tier, Arizona, Montreal, Philly, Pittsburgh, Vancouver, Washington, and Winnipeg. F tier, Anaheim, Chicago, Columbus, and San Jose. So, this will be posted to my Twitter as well, twitter.com/the_MexCanadian. If you guys want to check it out. This tier list as well will be the link to it will be posted. So that way you guys can make your own as well. So there'll also be a link in the description to it, so you guys can have fun with it as well. So thank you guys so much for watching and sticking. If you're here through this incredibly long video, thank you so much. More content to come in the future. Obviously, I do plan on making more of these tier lists as well as talking about various topics. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is the MexCanadian, and I will talk to you guys later. Adios.